Here's video footage from Syria purporting to be Russian jet fighters blowing up rebel groups that have been fighting against Syrian dictator Bashar Assad. Here, take a look.
قاصف بالطيران الحربي على مدينة اللطامنة بريف حماة الشمالي. الطيران الحربي الروسي يجدد قصفه لمدينة اللطامنة بريف حماة الشمالي والدخان يتصاعد. 30/9/2015 ولا يزال الطيران الحربي في الأجواء. ولا يزال الطيران الحربي في الأجواء تزامنا مع تحرير طيران الاستطلاع.
According to reports, that Russian attack killed 15 militants. Now, I use the word militants because I've seen various versions of the facts. Some reports say the target was fighters with the terrorist group al-Nusra. Other reports suggest that the fighters were the Free Syrian Army, that the United States has been equipping with weapons, as in, according to some reports, Russia just wiped out the so-called moderates that the West is backing to overthrow Assad. Russia has long had a naval base in Syria, in the port of Tartus. It's a port in the Mediterranean. Imagine its strategic importance to Vladimir Putin. Do you really think Putin would let Assad fall? There have long been Russian boots on the ground in Syria propping up Assad. Over the past few weeks, Putin has dramatically increased the number of men and machinery in the country. Here's a satellite photo of the Latakia air base. In a single aerial photograph of that air base, it can be seen that Russia now has 4 Sukhoi 30 fighter jets. Take a look at them. They are on par with American F-15 and F-16 jets. And no surprise, Putin has just ordered that the United States no longer fly over Syrian airspace. Putin says he's there at the request of the government of Syria. That is obviously true. Putin is telling the Americans to butt out, and what's Obama going to do? What should Canada do? It's one thing to fly aerial missions against the Islamic State terrorists, who have no air force and no sophisticated anti-aircraft missiles, but to fly in conflict with a squad of Russian jets? The real muscle is the Sukhoi 25s. They're built for attacking things on the ground, even tanks. Low and slow, like the American A-10 that devastated Saddam Hussein's army a dozen years ago. At least 12 of these Sukhois are now at Latakia. And you probably recognize this monster, the Mil-24, just a massive helicopter that Russia used to devastate the Mujahideen in Afghanistan in the 70s and 80s. At least 7 of these monsters spotted in Latakia. And this, the T-90 tank, more modern than America's M1 Abrams tank. Comparable for sure. 7 of these tanks photographed. 2,000 Russian troops on the ground. Russia's rubber stamp parliament voted to give Vladimir Putin authority to use military force, and he did use it immediately and brutally. This will absolutely tip the scales in Syria, undoubtedly. And of course, Russia has deployed drones for the first time in war. Unlike the United States, they're not really concerned about collateral damage, that is, killing civilians. Reports are that they're using drones in the Islamic State's capital city of Raqqa. In other words, it is war. It is the war the West really hasn't prosecuted. You know, we Canadians have 6 CF-18 jets over there and some refueling planes and some cargo and support, but they haven't really been rolled out in a full-scale, full-out deployment. They might go on a mission every few days. It's pinprick attacks. Careful not to risk any Canadians. Careful not to risk any civilians. I'm glad we're doing it, but it's not designed to destroy the Islamic State. Neither are the Americans or other allies. Now, Russia is different. They're not looking for a PR symbol. I mean, sure, they'll take that too. They're going in there to end the civil war in Syria by destroying Bashar Assad's enemies. That includes the Islamic State and other terrorist groups. It also includes the so-called moderate Syrians, if such a species exists, that the West has been pinning our hopes on. I have mixed feelings about this. On the one hand, Bashar Assad is a tyrant. He has waged indiscriminate war against his opponents, both military opponents and civilians. He allegedly used chemical weapons against his own people, something that Barack Obama once said crossed an uncrossable red line. Remember this?
We have been very clear to the Assad regime, but also to other players on the ground, that a red line for us is we start seeing a whole bunch of chemical weapons moving around or being utilized.
I didn't set a red line. The world set a red line.
Obama threatened to attack Assad but backed down and handed the whole matter over to Putin. In a way, Putin saved Obama politically, saying, oh, he'd make sure Assad didn't do anything bad like that again. Yeah, what a joke. Putin, Assad's arms dealer, Assad's sponsor, Assad's protector, promising to discipline him. Yeah, Obama let Putin come in, and now we see the end game of that. Russians fight differently than Canadians or Americans do. They always have. The Red Army destroyed everything in its vengeful counterattack on Nazi Germany. You can understand why. I mean, the Nazis were absolutely brutal to Russians, killing 20 million of them in World War II, besieging Stalingrad, and the Red Army repaid every cruelty on their westward march to Berlin. Russia was brutal in Afghanistan, even dropping bombs disguised as toys to kill Afghan children. They were as brutal as the terrorists fighting against them, including one terrorist named Osama bin Laden. Russia destroys terrorists and anyone who's near them. They flattened the Chechen city of Grozny, sealing off entire neighborhoods, just pounding it to rubble, dropping fuel air bombs. It just killed everyone. They have nothing to learn about brutality from Assad. They could probably teach him brutality. Look, the Russians are not dainty. They are not worried about the CBC or the New York Times fretting about an innocent person being killed or creating refugees. Vladimir Putin is there to kill as many of Assad's enemies as he can, to be strong and to show strength. The opposite of Barack Obama. Obama is losing his war against the Islamic State. New volunteer terrorists flood into the Islamic State faster than they are being killed by the West. Other than a few symbolic victories by the West, the Islamic State has not lost ground. Its authority has not been undermined. Its square miles, its population has not shrunk. It is a living symbol of victory for radical Islam. Putin will end that, I believe, and he has told the West to get out of his way. I do not support Bashar Assad. I do not support his brutal dictatorship. I do not support Vladimir Putin or his ally in Syria, Iran. But nature abhors a vacuum. It was Obama who allowed the Islamic State to take root when he pulled out of Iraq hastily just to give himself a talking point for the 2012 presidential election. It was Obama who allowed Assad to regroup under Russian leadership when Obama flip-flopped on his would-be attack on Assad. A Russian-supported Syrian dictatorship will be an evil place. But if I'm honest, I must also say it will likely lead to an earlier resolution of the regional war than the non-plan of the West's non-leadership. Putin is going to do a Grozny on the Islamic State. He will kill tens of thousands of people, maybe hundreds of thousands, some of them terrorists, some of them civilians. But it just might be that within a year he extinguishes the Islamic State as a safe haven for terrorists, as a recruitment and training base, as a symbol for global terrorism. We didn't do it, so he will. The West didn't conquer Berlin in 1945. Stalin did because he got there faster. The West didn't stop the Islamic State in 2014 or 2015. Putin just might, not because he moved faster, but because he moved at all. For the Rebel.media, I'm Ezra Levant.